Hey folks, so we're going to be talking a little bit about AI, plagiarism, and ethics. At this point in my academic career, as I'm sure you're very familiar with the conversations around AI, and some of you, if you're like me, have a little bit of AI fatigue. Some of you may be interested in learning more about AI, and that's totally your prerogative. Like I mentioned in the syllabus, AI is not welcome in my classroom, but you're also adults, and I'm not going to necessarily stop you from using it. So here we're going to be talking about AI, plagiarism, and what it means to use AI and be an ethical researcher and how to cite it appropriately. Again, as long as you are not plagiarizing and you are citing it correctly, I can't stop you from using it, but hopefully I can make an argument as to why utilizing AI is not necessarily the tool that some might think it is. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about plagiarism. You all are very familiar with plagiarism as a conversation by now. Plagiarism is literally taking somebody else's work and masquerading it as your own. And we know that it's wrong. Again, we've been having these conversations, some of you since high school have been having this conversation. But if we know that it's wrong, why do 17% of college students still admit to plagiarizing? Why is that? It could be a lot of different things. You don't understand the assignment or what the assignment is asking you. Maybe you feel pressured to complete work because of other things happening, whether you work a job or you have another assignment due. There's a lot of reasons why students choose to plagiarize. But honestly, out of all of that, the most common reason that folks plagiarize, even when they know that they shouldn't, is because they didn't realize they were plagiarizing. So let's talk about the different types of plagiarism, how they occur, and we'll also talk about ways to avoid that plagiarism. So one type of plagiarism is what we most associate plagiarism with. It's called direct plagiarism. It's literally copying somebody's work word for word. You copy and paste it directly in yours and you portray it as your own. This is probably when we hear the word plagiarism, that's probably what we think, right? We think of that. Another type of plagiarism is self-plagiarism. Now, this is going to rock some boats a little bit. If you have ever thought, I wrote about this before, I'm just going to take what I've already previously written and apply it to this class. It's my work, I can do it, right? That's technically called self-plagiarism. It's taking work that you have done before and are masquerading it as a new idea. So you can plagiarize yourself. And I know that seems wild, right? I hear a lot of students say, but I've already done the work. It's my work. I can do whatever I want with it. I want you to think about it from this perspective, right? When you begin to write academically and research academically, you are building something called a body of work, meaning that you are not always going to be writing one-off papers, right? A lot of the things that you are going to be doing and producing and composing are going to build on top of each other. So if you are constantly plagiarizing your own ideas, then nothing is original, nothing is new and innovative, and that hinders your body of work. So I want you all to start thinking of yourselves as scholars. If we are so willing to give strangers credit for the work, labor, and the research that they do, why are we so unwilling to give ourselves the credit for the work, labor, and research that we do? So I want you to think about it from that perspective. A lot of other professors might be less inclined for you to reference work that you've done previously on a topic. I'm not, right? I would much rather you practice and start beginning to think of yourselves as scholars and give yourself credit where credit's due. Again, we're willing to give literal strangers credit for the work that they do. Why couldn't we do that for ourselves? So self-plagiarism, if you have written about a topic before and you want to keep writing about it, don't plagiarize yourself. Give yourself credit, cite yourself. Another type of plagiarism that we see is called mosaic plagiarism. This is where we are taking phrases without and copying them or borrowing them without proper citations or quotation marks. And this is something, it could also be referred to as patch writing. Basically, if we have a quote and we think, oh, I'm going to take this quote, but I'm going to change a few words in the quote so that way it's not copying it word for word, that's called patch writing, where we're just kind of taking a few phrases or changing a few words and we think that is creating our own idea. This is probably the most common type of plagiarism that we see because, again, we're thinking, oh, I'm not copying and pasting it directly. I'm changing a few words. So it's not plagiarism, but it still is, because if we're taking key phrases, right, which is more than one word, that's not our idea. So in academia, it's probably the most common form of plagiarism that we see. Whatever you do, make sure that you are citing it appropriately and that you are providing enough evidence to explain the concept. Then we also have accidental plagiarism, which is also something that we see a lot. And this is usually when somebody forgets to cite their sources or maybe misquotes a source. So if you are trying to portray a quote as something that it's not, maybe unintentionally paraphrasing something or unintentionally doing mosaic plagiarism, it's an accident. You didn't mean to do it, but it happens all the time. We also see accidental plagiarism as somebody who assumes a topic is common sense, so they don't have to cite it. Well, I already know that information. Does that mean I have to cite everything I've ever learned? No, of course not. But if something feels like it's common sense to you, you have to think about your audience. Is it common sense to my audience? If I am writing a paper about rhetoric and it's for other rhetoricians, then I don't have to cite my sources on basic rhetorical concepts because other rhetoricians already know about that. But if I'm writing a paper about rhetorical concepts for maybe first-year writing students, it may not be implicit to where that information comes from. So I have to cite my sources in order for my audience to know where the information is coming from. Does that make sense? So sense is not common. In academia, we have to assume that sense is not common, so we have to back up our arguments with cited evidence. And I think it's also important to note that lack of intent does not absolve us from plagiarizing. So plagiarism, whether it's accidental or intentional, requires us to slow down and ask, where am I getting this information from? So that way I'm giving myself credit if that's necessary, I'm giving somebody else credit, or I'm making sure my audience knows where to locate more information so they can learn about my argument and my position. So how do we avoid plagiarism? Cite your source. That is the surefire way to always prevent that from happening. If you are alluding to an idea, or maybe the wording is not necessarily your own, whether it's an entire quote or a phrase, add a citation. Always, 100%. This includes direct quotes. So whether you are putting quotation marks around something that is word for word what the source said, or if you're paraphrasing in any capacity. If you are paraphrasing an idea, it's not your idea, so it requires an in-text citation. You can also do this by including a quotation. If you can't figure out how to paraphrase it without getting the meat and potatoes of what the source is saying, quote it. It's fine. Paraphrasing is probably going to be the most common way to convey these ideas and try and connect them to your ideas. And depending on your discipline, quotes may be more appropriate, paraphrasing might be more appropriate. For example, humanities relies a lot on quotations in order to provide evidence, because we're usually referring back to a text to provide some sort of evidence and connection. Whereas with social sciences and natural sciences, paraphrasing is the more common practice. Present your own ideas. After you have quoted or paraphrased something, you have to connect those ideas back to the overall question or thesis or hypothesis. So it's one thing to just drop a quote somewhere, but you have to connect those ideas and present your ideas to your audience as well. So if you are taking ideas from some other source and then connecting them with your own, that strengthens the source material. You can use a plagiarism checker. Sometimes they are not always accurate, right? And there's also larger discussions about equity with plagiarism checkers too. I think this requires nuance because how many times have we run through a plagiarism checker and it's like, oh, they're saying that I plagiarized the word A. You can't plagiarize an article. That's not how that works. Like an article form of speech. But if you're seeing like large boxes of text that is being flagged for plagiarism, that's something to take a look at. Finally, go to the writing center. You all are required to go to the writing center as part of this class, and you have access to it as part of your tuition, and you can work with peer tutors if you have a concept that you can't really quite figure out how to paraphrase, or if you're unsure if something requires a citation, they can help you with that. They're in the age where we have access to so much information and so many resources, there's no reason to plagiarize. You have access to resources to avoid plagiarism. So does this mean that using AI to help you write is plagiarism? And this is going to be the hot take, but yes. The way that these AI LLMs are designed is that it pulls from existing work, compiles that data through an algorithm, and then shoots a response at you. Regardless of how you engineer the prompt, it's still taking the work from others, combining it together, and giving you a result. It is not designed for accuracy, but it's designed for maximum prompt-based output. So it doesn't care if it's right. It doesn't care if it's accurate. It doesn't care if it's wrong. All it cares about is if you asked a prompt, if you put in a prompt in, is it meeting that prompt? That's all it cares about. So because of that, oftentimes AI will misrepresent data, even make up sources and make up citations that don't exist. So if we are willingly using it to compose our own ideas or even brainstorm, it's still plagiarism. If you don't get the prompt exactly right too, then you end up creating more work for yourself. So if I put in a prompt and it ends up not being the information that I need, and so I have to create another prompt and then another prompt and then another prompt. By that point, I should have just written it myself. So if you don't know how to prompt correctly and you're just doing prompt after prompt after prompt, one, you're not thinking for yourself. And two, you're just creating more work for yourself, because then if you have to do 5 prompts and then you have to run it through a humanizer AI, then at that point, you should have just written the 1-page paper anyway. Does AI as a tool make us illiterate? This is a very nuanced topic. When it comes to literacy, we have to approach it from a nuanced perspective. There's a lot of things that impact literacy. And there's a lot of criticism about AI as a tool and how it makes us less literate. But if we take a step back and define literacy, literacy is our ability to read and write. It's our ability to not just read the words on the page or write the words on the page, but it's also our ability to understand what we are reading, understand what we are writing. And our ability to read and write something is not something we are born with. They are skills that we learn and practice and develop all the time. And there are even times whenever we are reading something out loud, even at my age, whenever I read something out loud, I still stumble over words, because that's all about practicing and developing skills. Reading and writing are tools that we can use to develop our literacy skills. So just because we started learning to read when we were 5 or started learning to write when we were 5 doesn't mean that those skills still can't be worked on, still can't be practiced and developed. It requires practice. Therefore, to be literate, you need the tools, the ability to read and write, and you need the skills to engage meaningfully in all kinds of texts, meaning that you need to be able to comprehend what you are reading and writing. So while we can say literacy is our ability to read and write, it also means tool plus skill. If we start to think of reading and writing as the tools that we need to produce really complex things, produce complex writing and research, then we have to have the tool and the skill in order to be able to understand what we are reading and write in a way that is meaningful. Is AI making us illiterate? Some say no, some say yes. According to this MIT study, which you can click on, there is a clear cognitive debt that is happening the more that we use AI to help us write our essays. Many are making an argument that AI use is making the masses illiterate, where we are lacking basic reading, writing, and research skills. As I said, literacy is complex, and there's a lot of different things that impact that. But if we are focused on learning to read and write and practicing those skills, and then also taking a tool and the skills that we've acquired, that is also literacy. If I don't know how to do basic research, if I don't have that skill, then AI is not a tool for me. Google is not a tool for me. I have to learn those basic skills first in order for the tool to make sense. Another example I hear about is the calculator. Well, everybody thought the calculator was going to be the downfall of math, and now we can always use a calculator. We have access to calculators, blah, blah, blah. True. But in order for you to add on a calculator, you have to understand and comprehend and have basic math literacy, meaning me putting 2 plus 2 into a calculator and seeing that it says 4. I have to know and understand basic addition to know if that answer is correct or not. It's no different whenever you use AI to help you brainstorm or to help you create citations or in any capacity to help with your writing. You have to be able to have the skills to understand if AI is helping you as a tool or if it's hurting you. And that is something that we are missing, I feel. Is it making us illiterate? Not necessarily. Are people using it correctly, and do they have the skills to use it as a tool? Not so much. Here's an example that I want to point out. This is a meme of a little old granny, and she's got glasses on, and the text says, "I don't want to open a window. It's already cold in here." And the joke is that she has her computer open. Her computer is asking her to open a new window, but she's associating the word window not with her computer, but a window in our house that we might open. So your granny gets a new computer and they tell her to open a new window, and she doesn't know what that means. She has a very valuable tool at her disposal, right? She has a computer at her disposal, but she doesn't have the skills necessary to understand what the computer is requesting of her. So she may have the tool, but she doesn't have the skills to understand that. She still requires somebody to teach her how to utilize that tool, to develop those skills, to practice those skills, to use the tool effectively. So when we think about AI in the writing classroom, this is what literacy looks like in practice. It's one thing to say, this is a tool. And this is another thing to say, I have the necessary skills, or I don't have the necessary skills to use this tool effectively. But I want to take a pause, right? If we know this about literacy and plagiarism, and we talk about all of these things, the larger question I want to ask is using AI in research ethical? Because it's one thing to do research, it's quite another thing to do unethical research. So if we know that using AI is plagiarizing, especially if we don't provide proper citations, if we know that there are some people who may or may not have the skills necessarily to discern how to leverage AI as a tool, does that make the research that we do with the use and help of AI ethical? And the answer is no, right? If we don't know how to use something effectively, if we don't know how to use a tool effectively, or if we don't have the skills to do something just yet, It might require practice and time. And if we are literally just copying and pasting without giving any sort of credit where credit is due, which is impossible to do with AI, it's impossible to track down where they're gathering their information from, then it can't be ethical. Using AI in your research cannot be ethical ever. If we know that AI exploits people, exploits the work that they're doing, it's exploiting the planet, every prompt that you enter uses like 7 bottles of water. And if we know that it contributes to our overall cognitive decline, there's no way that AI use is ethical in research. Again, am I going to stop you from using AI? No. You're adults. You're going to make the choice that you're going to make. But I also think it's important for you all to understand the implications of that decision. If we are making choices without being informed, then that impacts our ability to be ethical researchers. So I have presented you the argument. I have presented you the information. It's now up to you how you leverage that information, knowing the implications of that decision. How can we use AI writing in research? I recommend not doing it, right? The whole point of this class is to learn how to write academically and research academically. There are ways that we can leverage technology in our research, and we talk about it all the time. But if you're going to use AI, it's important that you understand the implications of that use. That said, here are acceptable ways for you to use AI within your writing process without plagiarizing. You can use it to help you brainstorm. You can use it to create an outline, or you can use it to check your spelling and grammar. Think about Grammarly. If you use AI in any capacity, you need to cite it, even if it's Grammarly. Otherwise, it's plagiarism. There is not a general consensus about how to cite it yet, but for this class, I have linked the Brown University AI Citation Guide to assist you with your AI citations. They have 3 different formats. They have MLA 9, APA 7, and Chicago. Everything in this class should be APA 7. So make sure that if you do use AI, you were following this citation guide in order to cite AI appropriately.